Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Eating While Broke. I'm your host, Coline Witt, and today we have a very special guest, comedian, actor, writer, producer, but the godfather of podcasting, as everyone's been buzzing about. Marc Maron is in the building, and I'm nervous, which I never really get nervous. I'm excited. I've been excited. I've been emailing you. And just so you guys know a little backstory, I just walked up on him, did my elevator pitch, and he was really, really nice, guys. So if you want to get a glimpse of who he is, off camera, that's who he was. And I sent you an email.
I know. I didn't know how it was going to unfold, really. I said, okay. And then I didn't know if you were going to email. And then you emailed. And then I was like, maybe later. And then you kept on me. And okay.
Yeah, I did a little follow-up.
I'm driving out there.
Is that you were you used to eat meat, I'm
assuming,
right?
Yeah.
And then you were like, oh, I'm vegan now. How do we do this? And we went back and forth about that a little bit. And guys, before he announces his dish, I just want to let you know that I was so excited. I got in the kitchen too a little bit on his meal, and I helped make one of the ingredients.
I know. I was surprised. That's pretty good. Well, I just figured that ingredient out because when I was coming up early on, I don't even remember what I ate. I don't remember cooking. I don't, because I was in New York City, and there was really, the kitchen was hardly a kitchen in the apartment. This is going back to the beginning of the career. I can cook now, and I cook all the time. But back then I was wondering, what did I even eat? And then I started to think about it today, and I still can't remember that well because I didn't really eat breakfast. I smoked. So it was like cigarettes and coffee for breakfast. I don't know what happened at lunch, really. I know I didn't cook in New York back in, I was there 89, and in a small apartment on the Lower East Side. But I do remember trying to figure out how to eat cheaply and what me and the other comics would do. So I had to dig up this restaurant, which is the one I remember going to a lot, and look at their menu and then figure out what it was that we used to eat there. And I figured it out. And it wasn't easy. I mean, it wasn't hard to make vegan.
Yeah. Oh, no. It seems pretty simple. But why don't you tell our listeners what it is you're going to have me eating today?
Okay. Well, the original dish was at a place called Dojo, which was this sort of kind of almost like hippie Asian place on St. Mark's. And it was open late. So we would go. It was do you know who Todd Barry is, the comic? There was a few guys that would hang out, but we would eat there a lot because it was cheap. And what we would get, they had they had a lot of noodles and stuff, but they had turkey burgers, and they had these kind of tofu burgers, which were kind of weird because you'd think it was healthy, but it was deep fried, and it had so
Did it have that tofu texture too? Ooh.
No, I don't know how they made it. I remember it had seaweed strands in it somehow. But what we get a turkey burger, but not a turkey burger sandwich. You get the turkey burger on brown rice. And then they had this this Japanese barbecue sauce, which wasn't that good, but I forgot to tell you about that. So I bought one. We'll see how that goes. And then they'd have either a side salad or a side of steamed vegetables. And they made this dressing. There's a few different versions of this dressing in New York. I think it's a Japanese style dressing, kind of this carrot ginger thing. But I've tried to make it another way, which is more complicated. And then before I was going to talk to you, I looked up that recipe. Because when I went to look at the Dojo menu, it was a carrot ginger tahini recipe. So I found this and I tried it at home, and I'm like, that's kind of it. And then I sent you the recipe, so you did it.
I did it. I actually did it.
So basically what we're eating is brown rice with a patty on top with a side of the steamed vegetables with the dressing, and I'll put the barbecue sauce on the patty on top of the rice. So
there are no buns. Yeah, I was.
Well, you can have a turkey burger on a bun, but I think we were kind of. I don't know if I've always been health conscious, but it was the way to do it to get more of a fuller meal for the price, right? Yeah. You can get a burger, but the rice and everything else was the way to go. It was like a platter versus just a burger. Yeah,
I get it. Because, you go out and you order a burger, you're like, what's going on the side of it? What can I fill up even more with, right?
Sure. And a
But-
lot of times when you're starting out in comedy anyways, you kind of figure out, like once I got into the Comedy Cellar, you could just eat there. You would figure out ways to eat for free at the club. And that's not always healthy, but the Comedy Cellar had great food, great food. But I was trying to figure out what was I eating. And we'd either go...
I'm surprised you didn't get like chopped cheeses, but it sounds like you were more health conscious for sure.
Well, I was health conscious, but also like I was never, I don't feel like I was ever so conscious. Like I would spend money on food and the kitchen, like I said, I didn't have anything in that kitchen. I remember one time I tried to, like I'd gone out to eat at a Chinese place and they had this full like steamed fish with ginger. It was like really good. And I'm like, I'm going to make one of those. So I went down to Chinatown and I bought a wok and some soy sauce and a whole fish. And I got back to my kitchen. I'm like, I can't even cut this. It was so sad. It was just me and this whole fish. And
you didn't have knives or something?
Well, I did, but not much. I didn't know how to, manage a kitchen.
Yeah.
And I'd worked in restaurants my whole life. And that was the other thing about starting out too, back when I was in Boston. Before New York, is I worked at a restaurant, but it was a coffee place before Starbucks. And it was a real high-end coffee place that had a small menu. But still, I was just jacked up on coffee all the time, smoking cigarettes. So there wasn't a lot of eating going on that I remember. But I do remember when I lived in New York on the Lower East Side that, like, if I was going to eat breakfast, it was one of those kind of wrapped, that coffee cake with the cinnamon brown sugar crumble.
I like those,
Oh, yeah.
I love those.
Those are the best. But,
you
it's
can buy
all
them at Costco, too.
Yeah. So I remember eating those with coffee and smoking. And there was another place we used to go to. No.
Oh, okay.
But I'm on the nicotine again. I had a nicotine lozenge. I like nicotine.
What is that, like a patch or something?
No, it's literally a candy. And you just kind of put it in your mouth and suck on it for a minute until you feel the buzz. And then you just kind of stick it in your lip. I have one in now.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I don't know. I was off. I've gone on and off nicotine in forms over the years.
But you could feel the buzz from the cigarette. Well, I suck at smoking.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I've tried smoking weed. I tried smoking a cigarette once. I just don't think I know how to.
Yeah, well, I knew how to smoke anything. So, drugs are definitely part of this story.
I take edibles every night.
Sure, edibles.
I just chew it, and I'm like,
does it work?
I have the best sleep.
Yeah, I can't do that. I've been sober a long time.
Really?
24 years.
Wow, that's amazing. Now, were you sober back then?
No. That whole thing. But the other place I was going to tell you about, the other place we used to eat was this Polish place called Kiev. And it was like, there was a whole crew of comics that were around then. So it was me, Sarah Silverman, Jeff Ross, Louis, Nick DiPaolo, and Todd Barry, where we'd hang out after these clubs. But Kiev used to be open 24 hours. And I didn't want to try to figure out how to make pierogies or borscht. It's a process.
Yeah,
but that was like the other cheap place we would eat. Drugs and alcohol. I think when I got to New York, I was out here. I graduated college and I wanted to do comedy. I came out here
to LA.
Yeah, okay. And I didn't really know. A buddy of mine who I used to do like comedy skits with in college was a year ahead of me, and he moved out here, and we had written some stuff together. So I was going to write with him, and he lived in Culver City. So I moved to Culver City in with him. We wrote a script, and it was a nightmare working with him. And I just wanted to do comedy. So I had auditioned at the Comedy Store and the Improv or whatever. And then by coincidence, I got a PA job on a shoot that Mitzi Shore, who owned the Comedy Store, was doing. Okay. And then I was like, do you remember me? I auditioned for you. She's like, yeah, you can be a paid regular. So then I got a job as a doorman.
Okay. So, that's, by the way, I think it's so weird that the Comedy Store doesn't make their comics, but their comics are like doormen.
Well, there was a system.
Yeah.
And it was the way it worked. It was a singular thing. And all the doormen were comics. And back then it was before bringer shows and any of that crap, right? So when you were a door guy at the Comedy Store, you were in the system, and I loved the place. And eventually I got pushed out of the place in Culver City, and I moved up to Mitzi owned a house behind the Comedy Store that she'd rent out to comics. So I lived in Crest Hill.
Okay.
And, at that time, the big acts were, who was I watching as a door guy? I was the head door guy because no one wanted to do it. It was ridiculous. Because I was doing blow and I was like drinking. And I was living the life, And then like the big comics at the time, I was watching Damon in the main room, Kennison, Dice. Who else was like, who were the big acts around? Like Kennison, Sam Kennison and Dice were sort of coming up the same time, and they kind of blew up at that time. But there were people I like to watch. Belzer was there. I used to love watching Damon Wayans, Louis Anderson. But Damon would always he'd take chances and be pretty weird.
Yeah?
Yeah, because he would go on. I mean, this is 1987. And I would be like, well, what kind of, are you going to do your act? He's like, no, I think I'm going to do a jazz set tonight. And he would just push it and do these characters and just push it way over the edge. But Kennison was like that too. But anyway, so I started hanging around with Kennison, and doing a lot of drugs with that guy. So the point being is, when I left LA in 88, I was out of my mind from cocaine psychosis, and I was just crazy. Like I was, like hallucinating, and like I thought, paranoid, and I was way gone. And things fell apart at the Comedy Store, and I just left.
When you say they fell apart at the Comedy Store?
Well, I mean, as a door guy, there wasn't much to fall apart, but I was losing my mind from staying up too much and not sleeping and hanging out with these demons. It was insane at that time. It was the late 80s. It was insane. The people that were hanging around, what was going on there, because there was like this weird triangle between the Roxy, which was rock and roll. So, and Monday nights at the store back then were open. They were free. All the rooms were free. So all the freaks would come. And that was like Kennison's big night. He'd show up at like 11. He'd give me a bunch of money to go set up, a party at the house that would start on Monday and go to like Wednesday. It was just
literally
crazy.
3 days?
Yeah, crazy.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So I lost my mind, and I realized that, I remember the moment I kind of had a meltdown in the parking lot because I was, just out of my mind. And I had a falling out with Sam over some weird shit. And I remember asking the drug dealer, I'm like, I don't know, man. I don't know what to do. It's like things are falling apart. I'm out of the group. And the drug dealer was like, you gotta leave. You gotta go do your own thing. So if the drug dealer is telling you to leave, it's time to leave.
Yeah.
So
So
I went home to New Mexico. I got clean for the first time, went to rehab, and then I went back to Boston.
Wait, when you said home to New Mexico?
Yeah, I grew up in Albuquerque.
Okay. So you went back there and you got clean.
Yeah, I checked in, and if I can dry it out, and then I went back to Boston.
And how old were you, if you don't mind me asking, around that time?
That first time, so that was probably 88, so 63, 73, 83. I don't know, like 24, 25.
Okay. You were young.
Yeah, I mean, I went out there to, be, a comedian right after college, but it's all I wanted to do. So I went back to Boston where, and I got clean, but I wasn't really doing the thing. So I went back to Boston and I auditioned for Barry Katz, and I started, kind of trying to do open mics in Boston because I was a non-paid regular at the Comedy Store, but you didn't get a lot of stage time. I wouldn't say I had chops, but I had experience, and I've been hanging out with some, big comics, and I'd seen everybody. And I got a job at that coffee shop, and I was sober. I was doing spots at Catch a Rising Star. I auditioned for this guy, Barry Katz, who's still a manager. He had a bunch of rooms. And then like in 88 and like, I guess it was August of 88, I was in a competition. But I was doing these horrible one-nighters, by the way. That was after.
You mean like you were saying you were bombing when you say horrible one-nighters?
No, the way it worked, I mean, if you're interested.
I am.
So I get back to Boston, and I'm just doing open mics. And there's a few clubs. There's a scene in Boston. It's real. There's a lot of Boston comics. And I'm doing open mics. And there was a competition in 88 called the WBCN Comedy Riot. And it was like a process of elimination. And I came in second. And from 88, late in 88, because I came in second in the competition, I started working as a comic in 88. And the way the work worked in Boston is there were a few bookers that booked one-nighters. So these were comedy shows at, discos, hotel ballrooms, hotel, conference rooms, small bars. Like they were just satellite gigs that would be booked through these agencies. And you'd drive anywhere from like a half hour to 3 hours to 5 hours, anywhere in New England to do these one-nighters. And you'd go get a map, and you'd usually open for a headliner who came in to do. So that's how I started, is doing those one-nighters.
Okay.
And it was only a matter of time before I started drinking and doing drugs again. About a year and a half. I was kind of every year and a half or so, I get clean. I go about a year and a half without really doing the work to stay sober, and then I'd ease back into it, and it kind of went like that throughout most of it. Yeah.
When you say doing the work, like you're not going to like the AA meetings or what have you.
Well, I went for a bit, but I never really got it. You know, if you're going to do it that way, you're going to get it or you're not going to get it. The program, the way to use the program in order to not do the thing that's, you know, making your life bad. Like, you can go to meetings and listen and kind of, you know, absorb it, but until I think you start to understand the ideas for yourself, you don't really have any tools to not drink, like, you know, or do drugs. You got to sort of make phone calls to other people in the room. You got to go to the meetings and keep it fresh, and, you know, figure out how, when you're, you know, gonna use, or you're gonna drink, to either go to a meeting or make a phone call instead of doing the drugs.
Yeah.
So that's tricky.
Yeah.
Because, you know, you want to do the drugs.
Like, it's a definite pull. And by the way, you're going to have to start cooking for us. Did you eat breakfast yet today?
No, I waited.
I waited too. I'm starving.
It's going to be good. There's no way it's not going to be good.
Well, I'm going to see you make this Beyond Burger. Do you need oil when you do it?
Yeah. Yeah. You want me to turn this on?
Yep. I want to see you cook. Do you cook on electric or?
No, I got a gas stove.
Yeah, I have a gas stove at home.
You do?
Yeah, but here in the studio, everyone complains about this electric stove.
Yeah, I don't like electrics are sort of hard to control. Yeah, I cook all the time because not just because I'm vegan. I've been cooking a long time anyways. Ever since I had a kitchen that was functional, I cook. Because, like, if I go to a restaurant, you don't know what you're going to get. Sometimes it's not that good, and I'm able to cook, and I can follow recipes. So if I can make it better, why not cook? But the only problem with that is you got to make room for restaurants, because if you cook all the time, that means you got to clean up all the time. That means you got to, you know, keep your kitchen full. There's good reasons to go out and eat.
Yeah, I used to always say, like, as a single person, I always felt it was actually cheaper to eat out more than cooking. Even I think, what was it, Thanksgiving, I think the other day, I was like, sometimes, especially now, the groceries are so expensive.
Yeah.
I'm like, is it worth it financially to cook the meal?
Yeah.
Or to get it out? I know for Thanksgiving, I just did a seafood platter. I just went and got crab legs and lobster and some potatoes and called it a day. And it was, you know, cooking seafood is like nothing.
Pretty easy.
You just boil it and you're done.
Yeah, for Thanksgiving, I usually go to my mother's in Florida and cook for, 20 people.
You cook?
I do the whole dinner.
You do the whole dinner? Oh, I would love to see that.
Like, I've got a system, man. Like, I did it this time. This is the first time I've gone back as a vegan. So I had to figure out how to do that, for myself.
Yeah.
But
is anyone else in the family vegan?
Yeah, I have a cousin. But it was pretty easy because all the sides can be vegan.
Okay.
Outside of the turkey and the stuffing, and if you're going to make turkey gravy. But I actually tried to make a vegan gravy, which worked out pretty well. And all the sides. So I made turkey, stuffing, cranberry sauce, that's vegan.
Yeah.
I made mashed potatoes with olive oil, rosemary, garlic. I did string beans. I did Brussels sprouts. I did yams. All that can make vegan.
Now, are you still comfortable touching meat? Like when you had to
No,
make
I don't
the turkey?
care. No,
okay.
Like, I'm not like, it wasn't really ethical, the reason I did it. I ate a lot of meat. Like I had, for years, I had this smoker that they gave me, and I was smoking briskets and, chickens and just, eating a lot of fish. And then, I don't know, I got
You smoked the fish?
I have smoked fish.
Is it good?
It was okay to do like Jew style fish, because, I'm Jewish, I grew up with it. But, those smoked, like, you can smoke sable fish, which is black cod. It takes time, and, sometimes, like, there's certain types of food that are better made by people who know how to do it. like Indian food. You're better off finding a good Indian place and trying to manage those spices. But I got a good recipe for chana masala that I make now.
Really?
Yeah.
You call it chana masala? I love it's tikka masala, I thought.
Tikka masala. Well, chana is the chickpeas.
Okay.
So tikka is chicken, right? Or you make it with meat.
Yeah.
The chana is just chickpeas.
Okay, but you make it from scratch.
Oh yeah. Yeah, okay. I like it. I'll cook for the week, man. Like I got brown rice at home right now, and then like just have that for a base. I get kale, cauliflower, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then, for proteins, I've been air frying tempeh, which is great. Tempeh is it's like a soy. It's
Okay.
made from soybeans, fermented
Mm-hmm.
soybeans. Or these are pretty good. I'll eat these sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
I'll do air fried tofu, beans and rice of different kinds.
Okay.
And I'll do I'm kind of doing a macro thing. There used to be this restaurant in New York called Angelica Kitchen,
Mm-hmm.
which was really the sort of the first kind of macro place.
When you say macro, what does that mean?
Well, it's a system of eating vegan where, you get all these different things to balance your food. So usually there's a grain,
Mm-hmm.
a bean of some kind,
Mm-hmm.
a protein, and then there's a vegetable and maybe some fermented stuff. And she used to, do seaweed salad too.
Mm-hmm.
So like you make a bowl of that so you get everything you need.
Okay.
That kind
And
of
then
thing.
when you say protein, like you would just do like
Usually for there it was tempeh or tofu or something
Okay.
like. There's not or seitan. There's not a ton of vegan protein. Is you really get it from the vegetables, but tempeh, tofu, and seitan.
Okay.
Seitan's wheat gluten that kind of looks like chicken.
And then when you did the transition to making vegan, wasn't
that big a transition. Like it was
Really?
pretty easy. Yeah, I like cooking vegan because it's interesting.
I would think it's hard because when you go to the vegan restaurants in LA,
Yeah, but they're
By the-
trying to do something.
and they're impressive. I'll be honest.
Kinda.
I love eating vegan in LA.
Yeah?
Absolutely love it.
Like where
Like,
do
have
you
you
go?
been to the Real Food Daily place?
Yeah, yeah.
A lot of vegans hate on that place.
Well, that was based on Angelica originally, the place I just told you
Oh,
about,
okay.
New York. When Real Food Daily started,
Mhm.
she was basically ripped off that whole menu from
Really?
Angelica.
Have you eat there?
Yeah, I eat there. It's not as good as it used to be because I don't think that woman owns it anymore.
Oh,
And
okay.
they've gotten a little lazy, but it's okay.
Yeah, I had some other place. I think it was in was it Culver City? And it was like okay at best. I mean,
Like
it's
which
hit and
place?
miss. I forgot the name.
Oh, you want to warm up this
Tahini sauce.
the rice. Let's see.
There's no water in there, just so you know.
No water in the rice, but you
Yeah.
cook the rice.
Yeah, it's already cooked.
So so you can just warm it up. Napkins. What about napkins?
Napkins. All right. Well, let's go back to
Sure.
your story.
Okay.
All right.
What do you
So
got?
we left off with you being sober for a year and a half, and then you took a nosedive back.
Oh yeah. So I was in Boston, right?
Mm-hmm.
And doing the one-nighters.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually I started drinking and using drugs again. But then I was going. Then what happened is
I just have one question. For you drinking and doing the drugs, was it an everyday pull or was it something bad happened and then you wanted to do it?
no, it's just part of my life. Smoking weed every day, drinking at night,
Mm-hmm.
and doing blow occasionally.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't a daily blow dude. That's a big expense. But in Boston, we used to be able to drink for free at Catch a Rising Star.
Mm-hmm.
So you go do the one-nighters, and then you race back to Boston
Mm-hmm.
to get in on the free booze at night.
Okay.
So it was pretty regular.
Mm-hmm.
But in '89, I was, a lot of the people I started with were starting to break, a little bit, and a lot of them moved to LA. Like Dave Cross and that crew, they were going to do sketch comedy, and they came out here to make Mr. Show eventually. And I was like, I'm not a collaborative person. I'm a comic. So I moved to New York in '89.
Okay.
And yeah, I'd gotten sober again, and I got to New York, and I was on the Lower East Side, and I was trying to break into the clubs and doing, wandering around New York a lot. And I lived right on a street. I was just full of heroin junkies. Like it was before New York cleaned up, and there was a doorway like right next to my house where these junkies would line up
Jeez.
like it was a movie theater to get dope in the morning. And it was so sad because I'd see them every day, and I was sober.
Yeah.
And, I would be like, man, that's horrible. What a horrible life. And that went on for about a year and a half. And something turned in my head. I'm like, wow, I wonder what it's like.
No.
Yeah, it's right next door. You know what I mean?
I would see the heroin junkies in New York when I was a little kid, and my parents would be like, well, no, if I go back now, I see them, but I could recognize them more. But when I was a kid, my parents would always be like, this is what happens if you try to smoke cigarettes.
Oh,
This
wow.
is where you end up. And you'd be like, okay, never do cigarettes. Or they'd be like, that was a doctor and he had a family and he lost his whole family. And you'd be like,
Wow.
what? So we just,
Good.
I think.
Scared straight.
Scared straight. I think my twin out of 4 kids was the only one to try weed at like maybe 17. But the rest of us are pretty scared straight from those like, this person had a whole life and lost it, you know, and you'd see them like kind of, you know, doing a little balancing act, and you'd be like,
oh, that was a lot of the methadone. That was like you'd see him wandering around.
Yeah. So.
Well, thank God. Like when I did like in '89 or wait, what was it?
Did you end up trying it or no?
Yeah, I eventually.
You did?
Yeah, I went and tried. I didn't shoot or anything, but it was at that time that was so clean that a lot of people were snorting it. So I remember I went over there. After a year and a half of watching these people.
And were you 100% sober at the time? Or
yeah, pretty sober, yeah.
And that's your first comeback?
Kinda. I mean, I might have been drinking a little bit, but I remember buying it and then going in my house and snorting it and not really know. And and I just got sick and I was like sweaty and I kind of passed out, fell asleep, and I'm like, this is not for me. Thank God.
Thank God it wasn't for you.
I was a go fast guy, like Coke and booze.
Yeah.
The sort of like nodding out thing was not my bag. So
thank God.
It didn't stick.
Yeah.
Do
you ever think like what would have happened had that like, geez, your life would have been way different, right?
Yeah, there's certain, I guess, miracles or just, good luck. I always had a fairly healthy fear of drugs, but there were times in my life, even when I was doing them, I'd had some sort of idea, because I grew up like idolizing druggies, like Keith Richards and William Burroughs and these writers, Bukowski, whoever, the beatniks. Like I thought that was like how you did it. That's what being an artist was about. I'd romanticize cigarettes, drugs, booze. But I always was afraid that if I lost my mind, I would have to like pull out. And when I was in LA and I lost my mind, I kind of, that was as far out as I really
When you say
went.
you lost your mind, like you had a real meltdown, like where you're like...
No, I had cocaine psychosis. It took like a year and a half to get rid of it.
Okay. I don't understand what that means.
It just means you like either through lack of sleep or I think it was primarily lack of sleep. Like people who do meth now lose their mind pretty quickly with this meth. But with me, it was just because I was sleep deprived, and eventually you get a little psychotic. You start seeing like I got very mystically paranoid. Do you know what I mean? Like I used to do a joke about hearing voices in your head. Yeah. The joke was like, when you hear voices in your head, it's never one, it's always many, and you spend a lot of time trying to get them to pick a fucking leader.
I had a meltdown when I was 30.
Yeah.
And I was like hallucinating, and it was really just sleep deprivation.
Right.
But they ended up putting me in a hospital, and the doctors were like, schizophrenic, bipolar, PTSD, and I was like, let's just try giving me some sleep.
Yeah, and it worked.
And it worked. I did get better, and I completely came back to reality. But of course, I had to be strong enough to, tell doctors that nah, I'm not going to take whatever drugs you're assigning for a temporary.
Well, yeah, and the thing about that kind of manic break or psychotic break is that it does screw your head up. So, like, what I realized, I had created this evil sort of mystical backstory to the Comedy Store, and I thought, people were evil. Like, I had there was a big ideas in my head, and it took like really a couple years to get rid of those hallucinations or that way of thinking.
Yeah.
But, I eventually went back to the store. But anyway, so I tried the heroin, and then I realized, I got to get out of here. And I'd been with a woman for a while, and then we broke up, and she moved to San Francisco. So I just, not unlike when I left New York, I was just like, I got to get out of here. So I gave my bed to the guy across the hall who was sleeping on the floor. And I gave a lot of my stuff to the homeless people that were selling things on the street down there. Yeah. And I just got in my car, and I drove to San Francisco with no plan. And I remember I was had a little bit of that heroin, and I was smoking it with weed. I drove 22 hours in one stretch, and I just showed up on this woman's doorstep. And I'm like, can I hang out, And she took me back in. And then I was in San Francisco. Okay. And then I sobered up again. Okay. And then, I started doing more comedy there. That was a big change. It was a good place to do comedy. They had a very open mind about what you could do on stage and how it worked. And then I did a contest there I did it twice. I think the first one was maybe 92 or 93, and I didn't fare well. And then again, I came in second in like 94, and now, I was starting in the middle. I was starting to headline a little bit, and then I got a job on television in New York. Is this all good for you?
And then I just have one other question though. When did you realize that comedy was the path you were gonna choose? Because we didn't cover that, and I'm just curious because you seem like very determined to stay in comedy at that time. So what was
I didn't
that?
see any other choices. I always wanted to do it, and I thought, I never, for some reason, I didn't think like it was, like I never, like, all right. So what do you want to do? You want me to just?
This is your kitchen. I'm just trying to eat and enjoy a conversation with you.
The deal was, I always wanted to be a comic, and I didn't see any other thing to do.
Okay. Since you were like in high school?
Yeah.
Okay.
Since I was a kid, really.
Okay.
And what do you want to do with these veggies? We want to heat them up a little?
Yeah,
Let's put this here. Yes. So.
Do you want to put some water in it?
It'll be all right.
All right.
Yeah, man, I just committed to it, and I don't know how I did it. I don't know why, but I never really had a plan B. I never, like, by the time I took that TV gig, I didn't want to do it because it was not the kind of comedy I was doing. I was kind of aggressive and, like shocking and trying to, be very angry. And then, but I was broke, so I got offered this TV job. How'd
you get offered it? Like, what happened? Because you're in San Fran. Did you have an agent at the time or something?
Not yet, really. How did that gig happen? I'm trying to remember. It was Comedy Central very early on, and it was just, it was like a clip show. Okay. It was called Short Attention Span Theater. It had been hosted in different forms by Jon Stewart and some other people, and this was sort of the last version of it. I'm trying to remember how the guy picked me, this guy Robert Small. But it was basically me in this fake vault where I was like supposedly showing clips of comics and comic movies, but it was really all driven by promotional stuff. Okay. And they just wanted me, it's like a VJ job, which was, I was devastated because it didn't serve my voice. But I didn't see that I had a choice.
Yeah, but it was paying your bills too, right?
Well, I never made that kind of money.
Okay.
So what I was doing for the first 6 months of it, I would stay in San Francisco living with that woman, and I would go back to New York for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and strip the show. So you would do 4 shows at a time, and I'd fly back to San Francisco for like 5 days, and I'd fly back to New York. That went on for 6 months. They got me a sublet in New York. And then eventually I moved back to New York in like the mid-90s for the rest of that year. And I had to fight to get myself a writer. I had to fight for us to do comedy bits because they just wanted me to be a talking head. And I was already mad that I was doing this job. I was a pain in the ass. And like some people that I worked with, I think they thought I was a complete asshole, and I probably was. I don't remember the drugs being a deal then. But I learned how to read prompter. I learned how to be on TV. I got into the union. I got insurance. I got all that stuff. But I hated it. Okay. I hated every minute of it. But I knew that there was a good thing to it.
Yeah.
But it didn't really take off. It surfaced in that work. And then after that was done, I was in New York and just leaning into comedy. And I started to, so I was 94, 95. And the other thing about comedy at that time, if it's interesting to you, is that this looks pretty good, right?
It looks really good. I think once we add all the sauces.
Sure. The other thing is that like there was a lot of basic cable television, right? So we were all getting these gigs like Evening at the Improv, Caroline's Comedy Hour, Comedy on the Road, MTV Half Hours. Like there was all these little TV opportunities that ultimately didn't mean much, but they were something.
Yeah.
So we were doing that stuff. MTV always had some sort of comedy showcase thing. So we were kind of working towards that, trying to get on Letterman. Conan started in 94. But I got back into the drugs and that got a little crazy. But yeah. that's when alternative comedy started, and we were doing this Lower East Side thing, and then it became like I started drinking again. I married that woman.
The woman in San Fran?
Yeah, I met her at my brother's wedding, and she knew I was kind of a wild card, but we got married. We were living down on 3rd Avenue and 16th, and then the alt comedy thing started, and I started using Coke again and drinking, but I was trying to hide it and keep it under control. And we got married, and we moved out to Queens, and I don't know, like it was grim because I'd done the TV thing, I was doing comedy. Now I'm married to this woman. She kind of wants to have kids and stuff, and I was not sober, and I really sort of fell into a kind of bitterness and a kind of resignation, like, all right, well, I guess I'm not really going to make it in show business. Maybe I can get a job on a local TV show here I'd done some segments for, and just ride it out in New York as one of those people that kind of gets by. And it was pretty devastating.
Well, like, what drove that message to your mind? Was it like you felt like you weren't booking enough comedy clubs, or were you possibly bombing? Like, what made you say, well, maybe this isn't?
I wasn't bombing, but I was a specific type of act, and I wasn't really getting much traction. Mm-hmm. Like everyone in like other comics respected me. People knew who I was, but people thought that I was doing a character or what. But I was really angry and kind of like intense, and it wasn't really a character. I don't think I got into comedy to entertain. I think it was like, this is how I'm going to engage my voice. This is how I'm going to find myself, how I'm going to say what I want to say. Because for me, when I was growing up, comics always were able to kind of make things understandable, disarm things, ease fear, make you see things a different way. Like I thought, hey, that's an art, so I want to do that. Yeah. And the guys that I looked up to were kind of said things. So it was really like, I don't think I ever thought in terms of entertaining people. I'm not sure I do now either. But so I wasn't trying to like, sell arenas or anything. I just thought that eventually, because I was, doing it my way, that it would come around. So at that time, I wasn't coming around. I started doing Conan. Like I did Conan like 3 or 4 times a year. I became a popular panel guest.
But at that time, you were doubting yourself?
Well, yeah, of course, because like I just kept chipping away, but I couldn't really sell tickets. And, I would do, I do club work, but it was, I'd go do the clubs, but it would be, you weren't making a lot of money because you were an unknown headliner, really. And unless you can draw people, which I never understood, I wasn't particularly pleasant to club owners. I never really thought about like, I got to come back, figure out a way to come back here. I got to build these networks. I was just sort of like, fuck you, I do it this way. And, eventually people will get it. Yeah, yeah. And they didn't.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the long and short of it. But I'm trying to think what eventually happened.
Did you, but was your marriage going fine at the time?
No.
During all of that? Or
no,
why?
What happened was, this looks all right. Here, you want to do that?
Yeah, I definitely want to do it. Sauce it. So right now we're, just for all the
Japanese
listeners,
barbecue sauce.
We're doing the Japanese barbecue sauce. Mark has plated our plates with brown rice, vegetables. I just drowned my Beyond Burger in Japanese barbecue sauce. But I'm more excited about the tahini sauce because, guys, guess what? I actually made it.
You did a good job. Here.
And I was nervous about it.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So you put it on the vegetables.
That's what I did, yeah.
I'm going to mix it. I'm going to put some on the side.
Why not?
I'm a saucy.
Sure. Sauces are fun. So the marriage, yeah. So what happened was, in the middle of this sweaty, bitter period where I'd given up and resigned myself to being, just an average, B-room headliner and trying to make do in New York to service this marriage that I wasn't happy in. A woman came up to me at a comedy club, and she's gorgeous. And she's like, hey, you're Marc Maron. And I'm like, yeah. And she goes, what happened to you? Like, and she was like a comic. She was a fan. And I'm like, what are you talking about? She's like, well, you look all fucked up. And I'm like, I guess. And she's like, well, I can help you get sober if you want to do it. And I'm like, what, with AA or whatever? She's like, yeah. And I'm like, and she's so pretty. So I'm like, I just wanted to do anything she wanted. So I started just following her around. And, she started taking me to meetings. And we started having a thing. And
while you were married?
Yep, the marriage fell apart.
Mm-hmm.
Because I kind of wanted it to, but it was kind of dramatic. Because she, my wife found out about her, and I didn't know how it was all going to go down, but it went down pretty dramatically. Like, changing the locks. I had to find another place to live. I had to stay sober through all that shit. There was the drama of like being with this other woman and being like, I'm all right. My marriage is coming unglued. Are you in? Are we going to do this or what? And she reluctantly, she's younger than me, and she was like, I guess. And so I guess, well, that's enough. So yeah, the marriage fell apart. I had a sublet a place way downtown. It was like a really chaotic time. Mm-hmm. But I was going to meetings like a lot. Mm-hmm. And that's when I kind of like I was going like every day, at least once a day. And I locked in with a bunch of people that were just getting sober, and we were going to meetings all over. The woman was taking me to meetings. We were going to meetings together. And that was like 99. Mm-hmm. And that's when it stuck. So the first time I got sober was in 88, right? And then when it stuck was 99. So I was in and out for over 10 years.
Wow.
And now I got 24. But for whatever happened with that marriage, because I ended up marrying that girl. That's another story. Well, so I get sober, and I'm doing it. I'm hanging out with this beautiful girl. What? Good, right?
I didn't even mean to sneak a bite on you, but my goodness, this is delicious.
Yeah, works.
Oh my God, this is delicious. Between the tahini, the barbecue sauce, mm-hmm. even the Beyond Burger, mm-hmm. Good. Absolutely delicious.
Mm-hmm. We did it.
Mark, this is really good.
It's good.
It is really good.
Do it at home. It's healthy. Some people don't love the fake meat. They say, well, it's processed. I'm like, yeah, but it's still not full of fat and cholesterol.
It's such a great... I don't even think a regular burger would taste good with this.
No. A turkey burger was okay.
I like the Beyond Burger.
I like Beyond Burgers.
Honestly?
Good.
That sauce. I'm so glad you brought the sauce.
They make a bunch of different sauces, different versions of it. So let me try to get you up to speed. So, okay. Mm-hmm. So I get sober. I'm with this woman who's stunning. Mm-hmm. And I'm just doing the comedy. I'm trying, then I got a deal. Like there's so many side stories, I was doing the festivals. Like I went to Montreal. Mm-hmm. And I'd already been doing comedy at that point for, 88. It was like 99. So I've been at it for 10 years, and I've had a lot of little TV appearances and some opportunities. I got management and an agent because mm-hmm. of that TV show on Comedy Central. Mm-hmm. And, a big manager. And the agent that I was with was very good at getting people deals. I'm trying to think, I had a few deals.
But during this whole period, you're not taking any side jobs, any side hustles. You're
no,
100%.
Not since 88, all show business one way or the other. But it was lean for a long time. And then when I did that TV show, I was making some money. Uh-huh. And then, I got divorced. So there goes all that money. I wrote a book. I did a one-man show, and I was not able to save much money because it comes and goes mm-hmm. in this game. I didn't get a big amount of money for the book deal. But I wrote a book based on a one-man show I did called Jerusalem Syndrome. And then that book came out, but it's like a $30,000 deal, uh-huh. With the idea that if it sells, you make more money. But, it didn't really make any more money. And then taxes take some. And so, but the book comes out like within weeks or a month or so of 9/11. So I'm in New York on 9/11. And... I was out in Queens, and I remember seeing it on the computer on the AOL homepage, and just one of the towers was down, and I went up to the roof, and it was like crazy, man. It was crazy. So, I saw, there wasn't a sound in the world. Just, I was on the roof. It was a clear fall day, no cars, no planes, no nothing. And you just saw the smoke coming off, downtown. And then, the second tower went down, and it was like completely, I can't even explain it. The entire world changed, and we had to deal with that horrendous attack in catastrophe as a city. And, you know, everything just sort of stopped, you know, and you couldn't go downtown, and that hole was smoking. Then the signs were going up, you know, missing people everywhere. And the smell of the burning was in the city for like what seemed like months. We didn't know when we were going to start doing comedy again, but we started not long after down at the Comedy Cellar, a few weeks, you know, trying to do it. And people were in complete shock, and they didn't know what to do. Everyone was walking around totally, you know, in trauma. And, you know, we started doing comedy. It was pretty dicey because I was, you know, trying to be provocative and talk about the politics of things. And there was like, almost got in a fight with a Marine in the comedy club. And it was just a crazy time.
Yeah.
And the woman I was with, she that day was going to work at a job she had downtown. She got out downtown and it was raining ash. And then she had to walk all the way up, and I couldn't get in touch with her all day. But it just broke her. And she was like, she left New York. Wow. And she left and went home to Seattle, and I was there kind of riding out the aftermath of 9/11. And then when she finally, you know, kind of pulled herself together, she's like, I can't live in New York anymore, and I want to go to LA. So we moved to LA, and I had a deal at that time. I'd gotten a deal with Fox Studios at the Montreal Festival, which was a development deal. It gave me some money, gave me a cushion. We moved, set up shop here, and you know, I sort of had to start over again. The deal didn't really go anywhere. You know, I got set up with a writer, and I've had a few of those deals where you write a pilot script and it doesn't go anywhere, but you make money on those.
Yeah, yeah.
So you can bank some like serious cash, and just like, and I'm still weird about money. Like I don't spend it much.
Well, yeah. Well, I would imagine in this business, like I actually am a firm believer in living on a budget, and I don't go over it. Mm-hmm. You know, if I made $100,000 in a month, which I've never actually done, just so you know, but you know, if I would still live on my, you know, $5,000 a month budget, and I would just can the rest. I would not even be in my sight. Like I'm strict with my budgets.
I don't know what it is. Like, I don't know if I was ever in it for the money. I'm happy because there were times like to get up to where we are now. Like throughout this time, look, I'm doing comedy. You know, I had some deal money, and now I'm in LA, and I've got to reestablish myself in LA. I go back to the store, which I really haven't been at since I lost my mind. I get back in there primarily because, you know, there was a new booker there, and I had some sort of mythic reputation because of the book I wrote. There's a chapter in Jerusalem Syndrome about the Comedy Store and about my experience with Sam and about the drugs and everything and the craziness. And some young comics had read it and put me into this zone of like, yeah, that's, you know, Maron. And then there was alternative comedy going on, so I was trying to get on those rooms. But I didn't have a lot of traction, but I established myself, and that was in 2002.
When did podcasting enter?
Well, yeah, I mean...
Was it around that time?
Well, what happened was... Not really, not quite, but what happened was, let me have that sauce.
The sauce is so good.
How's this going for you? Is this all right?
Yeah.
In general?
It's amazing.
Am I being a decent guest?
I'm surprised. It's so funny because you ask those questions. You'll be like, if you're interested, or it's very much.
Well, the story is so long and convoluted, and you know, there's a lot of ups and downs.
I love that.
But okay. So, what?
He's calling cut for something. This food is so good.
I'm going to just readjust your camera since you don't take it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Good, right?
Jared, I wish I would have brought more food because this is so good. I wish you could try it.
I haven't seen your reaction like that in a while.
Dude, some of the meals on this show,
no good?
No bueno. But this sauce?
Ah. Maybe you'll get a sponsor out of it.
Yeah. Oh.
What kind of sauce is that?
It's like a Japanese barbecue sauce, but I am totally going to get it. With the tahini, it's amazing. It sucks because we're supposed to take pictures, but I don't think we're going to be able to with this meal. It's so delicious.
You can come back anyway. You were going to talk about podcasting.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Wait till he says. You gonna tell us when to chime in? Okay.
All right. So in terms of all this ups and downs, I know that part of this show you're doing is about, staying in the game or
Not quitting.
not
Really?
quitting. Well, even after all the deals or this and that, like I still wasn't able to sell tickets as a comic, but I was a known guy. But
When you say sell tickets, like if they book you to a club, like no one's showing up?
It's not no one.
Yeah.
But, I'm not getting door deals.
Okay.
I'm getting flat rates to do headlining on weeks where they, don't have somebody there that's going to, sell tickets.
Mm-hmm.
And, after the comedy boom in the 80s, there were still a lot of guys around that sold tickets. But I never understood how they made so much money until, I was able to sell tickets and get door deals. I was very naive about the business.
Can you explain a door deal for everyone that doesn't know what it is?
Well, door deals where you are confident that you'll sell out and you do a deal with the club where you get 80% of the door versus a bonus or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And, they can, sell drinks,
Mm-hmm.
but which is really the business they're in.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're doing 4 shows at a club that sell out, for whatever amount of money the ticket is, and you're getting 80%, that's different than, getting $1,200 for 5 shows.
Yeah.
So, once you get to a certain level, you can do these door deal structures and make real money in nightclubs if you sell out.
Yeah.
But I wasn't that guy. But I was doing comedy all the time.
Okay.
And also, I did little parts in movies here and there. I did, I was in Almost Famous for a minute. And, I was trying to do that work, but I never really had an agent for movies and TV. I had, there were agents that did favors for my manager, but I never really committed to acting. Because it's like relentless. I can't take that kind of rejection. Are you kidding me? Sit in those audition rooms? Are you kidding me? There's no way. It just was not. I wanted to do it, but there's no way that I could handle all that.
So when I see you on TV now, is it just like, hey, we want Marc to do
Sometimes,
a role?
yeah.
Or do you never audition now?
Well, no, I auditioned for Glow.
Okay.
I sent the tape. I did a video, and they picked me. But I have some profile. Like people know. Well, we'll get to that. So 2004, I'm not making a living really that well at comedy. I don't. I can't. It's just very tentative. I bought a house in Highland Park.
Okay.
I was with the woman. And then I get offered this radio job for Air America Radio, the lefty talk radio network.
Okay.
And this was, in response to, what was going to be the second term for, George Bush Jr., W. Al Franken and a bunch of people, Liz Winstead, and, they wanted me to be on this network out of New York and be on a morning show. And I'd never really done radio.
Yeah.
So this was really the sort of kind of cosmic choice that led to what became my future. And it was that I got offered this job, and it would have been hard. Like, I was in LA, I would have to move to New York. I had kept the apartment there, which was good.
Oh, the whole time you had the apartment?
Yeah, I subletted it.
Okay.
In Queens.
Okay.
And, I was with this woman, and it was a difficult relationship because, when you get sober with somebody, you're out of your mind. And, she was, younger than me, and it was just a volatile, relationship. But I didn't see any choice but to take the gig because the money was like solid. It was crazy. It was almost like TV money because they had a lot of money. So, but it would be me going back to New York, to do morning radio, and it was political talk radio, and we had to crunch a lot of news. So it was like getting up at 3 a.m. to get to the studio to be on the air at 6, from 6 to 9 every day. And I didn't really know what that would be like or whatever, but I did it. I flew back, and obviously put a strain on my marriage, but I was getting up, and we were doing a lot of comedy bits. It began with 3 of us, and then eventually one of the people kind of got pushed out. I ended up becoming the driver of the show, as opposed to the comedic sidekick. I was sort of the lead, and it was incredible because it's live. You're in it, and I was doing my thing, telling stories, I learned how to do radio, and I did that for like a year and a half.
And you loved it.
I loved it, but it became very difficult to do stand-up because when you're getting up at 3 a.m. and doing morning radio.
I was gonna say, are you just sleeping during the day and then doing your comedy,
Well,
and then just going straight from comedy to radio?
Well, I learned how to get sleep at different times.
Okay.
I try to get 4 or 5 hours at night and then go to work and then get a nap in during the day and try to do a set or two. And I do sets on weekends, but you're always fucked up. When you do morning radio, you're walking around like you've been in a pillow fight. You're just fuzzy and you can't quite, reality. It was fucked up.
Yeah.
It's you feel kind of sick all the time. But I did it for a year and a half, and it strained the marriage. And then I got fired from Air America because they were going in a different direction. That's a whole other story, that network and what happened there. It's crazy. But they pushed us out, and then I came back to LA, and they were gonna, someone was gonna try to get me an evening show, which they did for a while. But I get back, and my wife leaves me. I went out and did some shows on the road with Henry Rollins and Jeannie Garofalo. I came back and my wife's I want a trial separation. And I think she'd start up with another dude. And, I was like, oh, no, I couldn't even fathom it. So she leaves. And, trial separation is not really a trial separation. So I was doing everything I could to make myself better, to go to, anger management and all this shit. But she was out. And that fucking leveled me. That, talk about hitting a bottom in sobriety. So here I am. I'm off the radio. She leaves me and just hires these lawyers. We don't even have kids, but she just thought that she deserved the house and it was in my name. And she just the lawyers just put me through hell and just basically almost bankrupted me. And
that had to be tough. And then the whole time you're staying sober.
Yeah.
Jeez.
I did stay sober. And, comedy was here and there and
Did you end up keeping the house?
Yeah. But I didn't really understand what divorce was when you have money, because I'd made money with the radio thing, and saved it. And she just was killing me. You have to do that whole thing where you, what do you call it, that process, the disclosure process?
Mm-hmm. You have to disclose all your money, the assets, the homes.
Right, but it's a racket because divorces don't end until somebody gives up. Unless it's it's a state where you just split it, right? Mm-hmm. Which California is. Mm-hmm. But there's all these loopholes. And she hired a real animal to come after me, and I hired this little scrappy lawyer that a friend of mine knew. But
I'm sorry.
It's all right. Whoever's got the money, they're going to finance everything. You're going to pay for their lawyer, or you're going to pay, whatever.
Was she making any money at the time, or were you?
Not really.
Oh, okay.
She was doing comedy and doing this and that, and she used to be a model, but she wasn't really making any money. Mm-hmm. And that was fine. I didn't mind, supporting the situation. I helped her produce a one-person show, and she eventually wrote a book. But the deal is it got very heated and bad, and it really broke my spirit entirely. I was heartbroken, and I couldn't understand why we couldn't do it fairly. Yeah. And in retrospect, she just had her mind on the house. She thought that she deserved that house. She made it a house. And in retrospect, I think she was right. And I could, if I had understood things better, because I thought you get half, I get half. That should be enough, right? But
yeah.
but her lawyer then I didn't know about spousal support. I didn't know about that whole thing. And then her lawyer was trying to get the spousal support number up to where it wasn't. It usually is about the last year of marriage, what you made. But her lawyer was because of my job, they wanted to make it arc over 5 years, including the Air America years, which would have mean I would have been into her for $8,000-9,000 a month, which I didn't have. And we ended up in court for no reason, and it was a nightmare.
It sounds like a nightmare.
But so I'm broke, and I'm about to lose the house because I'm trying to, win this divorce or at least make it fair. But, all my money's paying for a lawyer. It's paying for her lawyer. It's all my money. Mm-hmm. And then, what happened was Air America kind of resurfaced, and there was somebody within Air America that was we want to try a streaming video show, which is before streaming. Mm-hmm. It was before anybody, the technology wasn't there. Mm-hmm. And I'm I don't care what it is. if you can give me what I was making before and give me like $60K up front so I can give it to this woman and stop this shit, I'll take the job.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, okay. So they gave me $60K, and I gave it to her, and I'm like, are we done? And she's like, okay, yeah, we're done. And then I got back on my feet, and that streaming job that nobody watched, Break Room Live, that lasted a year, and I was barely able to function because I was so shattered from the divorce. But, it got me back on my feet, and then I got back to LA, and this was 2008, and I'm like, just barely solvent, and I didn't know how to, like, I still wasn't a big comic, and I didn't know what I was going to do, and I was pretty depressed, and I had no idea, what we were going to do. But actually it happened a little before that. Like, when they fired us at Air America, they didn't kick us out of the building because I had 3 months on my contract. So me and my producer were like, there were people doing podcasts. It basically was just Corolla and like Doug Benson and a few others, but it wasn't a thing. I said, can we figure this out? So at the beginning, we were just like going into the studio at Air America after hours because we knew the tech. We'd let guests in, on the freight elevator. And so we did the first dozen or so like that.
Wow.
In secret.
Okay.
And we, Apple was looking for people who had some kind of profile, and they got behind it. So there was some banners, and, I had to figure out how to get more Twitter followers, and like this was all happening. That's why we were there at the beginning. So I had to figure out how to get Twitter followers and how to get attention. So I was booking, it wasn't the show that it is now, but guests would come on and some of them would get press, and then it started to sort of build like that. And then I got back out to LA, and I'm like, well, what are we going to do? I got to figure out how to do it here. So I reached out to Jesse Thorne, who was a pretty early adapter to podcasting. He was a radio guy too, and he told me which mics to get and how to hook them up. And I stole a mixer from Air America, like this little blue mixer, and I set that up in my garage, and I was running the mics through the mixer right into my laptop. And and the garage wasn't even a thing. It was just literally garbage in there and a table. And I started talking to comics. So the whole beginning of the show was me basically bringing people in, to, apologize for being an asshole.
Oh, wow.
So the entire style of what I do is based on me having people over to talk about me. And at first there was like a third act. But me and my producer, Brendan McDonald, who's a brilliant guy and still with me, and he had to do the show on the sly for years because he had another job where he made money. We couldn't make money at the beginning. Yeah. We had to put together like a donor thing. This is before, what do you call it? Pinterest, or what's the one that everyone uses? I always forget the name of it.
I don't know why I'm spacing on it, but I know what it's like where you subscribe. It begins with a P.
Yeah. What is it?
What is it?
Patreon. Yeah. There was no Patreon. There's no Patreon. So we had to set up like, if people like our show, if you give us this monthly payment of like 10, 5, 25, we'll send you some T-shirts or whatever. So I was in my house with 500 envelopes. I had a roommate at the time because I couldn't really at my own house. And we're stuffing envelopes and we're trying to get this thing, trying to get like some income coming in. And it was all pretty crazy. Then we started doing live ones. We created a pay site. We thought, well, maybe if we do live ones and then offer them for sale. So we were doing that. There was no way to make money in podcasts. Yeah. If you wanted to keep building your audience. Yeah. Because if you put a paywall up, then that's a real gamble. How are you going to get new people?
What do you mean a paywall?
Well, you could do in order to listen to the whole show, you pay.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But there's only a handful of podcasters. So what happens is, I'm doing it in my garage, and there used to be a third act, which was a comedy act, and then it became just me talking up front and then doing guests. We had one or two sponsors. It was like, Adam and Eve sex toys and this coffee sponsor out of Wisconsin.
And how did you get the sponsors?
Well, I don't know. At that time, I don't remember how we got those first two. The coffee sponsor was somebody who were the only sponsors for my streaming show that nobody watched. So I just carried them over as a favor. They weren't paying me hardly anything, but they were sending me free coffee. Then Adam and Eve had done a few podcasts. They were also, I think, a radio advertiser. There was a time at the beginning where when it started to happen, podcasts, like radio ad consultants were selling the podcasts. So we had Audible, sex toys, Adam and Eve. We had the coffee sponsor, but that was really it. And it wasn't enough to make a real, living. And the numbers were what they were. And no one knew about podcasts. So there was just a small crew of us, and we were all sort of in touch. Rogan came a little after me. The Nerdist, Chris Hardwick was around. Corolla, Jay Moore had a show. Jimmy Pardo, Kevin Smith had his network at the time. Jimmy Dore. There was like a handful of cats who were like, chipping away at it. And then it kind of like, I started to get more press for the podcast and, because of guests and a lot of the kind of entertainment journalism. I was doing their job for them. So they'd always refer to what guests would say on my show.
Okay.
And, and write articles about it. And then the profile of the guests started to get bigger. Robin Williams, Ben Stiller, Conan. These people were coming to my house. But
that's what I wanted to know. Like, these people are coming to your house. Like,
yeah.
And you were just like, this is it. Like Barack Obama sitting in your garage. Like,
well, by that time, the garage was pretty cool. Like, like it was like,
I want to see it so bad.
Okay. Well, that garage is gone. I'm in a new place.
Okay.
But it was full of my whole life, books, art, things, guitar. Like it was this beautiful, like, kind of like, it was, I wouldn't call it a man cave, but it looked more like a library and a museum. It was crazy by that point. But at the beginning, Brendan and I, our only commitment was, we're going to do a new show every Monday and Thursday, no matter what. And we've done that since 2009.
Wow.
And, it's been crazy. So it started to build up steam, and then podcasts started to get more attention, and then more people started getting into it. And then, networks were starting, and then a guy, Jeff Ulrich, created a advertising interface that would link advertisers with podcasts. So some of the, and then the radio people who were kind of glomming on podcasts, they kind of fell back a little bit. And then all of a sudden, there was a real game to it, and then it became a little higher profile. And we all were kind of a community at the beginning. And then it just kind of, now look at it. We were there, people say like, look what you did. I'm like, it's good and bad, I guess,
Why did you say bad?
Well, it became like this thing. It became sort of like anything else. Like everybody thought, I really think that I enabled people to think like, well, if that guy could do it, I could do it.
Yeah.
And then it became very glutted, and everybody was trying them. And then people would last a week or 2 weeks, and then there was like kind of predatory kind of trade shows where they they asked me to speak at one. I didn't realize what it was, but it was a radio consultants who realized that podcasting was a racket, and they could convince a bunch of people that they could sell them the equipment, and they could show them how to do that.
Yeah.
So like they kind of bring people in almost like a motivational speaker way, like anybody can do this, get in it, And it kind of blew up. I mean, no, in a bad way, in that like eventually, Brendan and I, because of what we do and how we do it, are very kind of, we're workaholics, and he's very sort of specific about how he does audio. He's an audio producer, and we're still only audio. And that was what we set out to do. And he spends a lot of time doing what he does. I do what I do. But as the business kind of grew, it's only a bad thing in that, everyone has a podcast. It's like a joke.
Yeah.
And, and then the bigger enterprises got involved, and now, there's, Amazon, Spotify, all these, it just became this huge business where before it was just, pretty scrappy.
Yeah.
And then people started selling networks,
Yeah. And people really like this, even if you look at social media, like I've talked to influencers, like I think people or the audience really like the scrappy underground versus the commercialized. And I could see what you're saying with podcasts becoming so commercialized.
Yeah.
But even also like when you see someone like yourself, me being a new podcaster, it's like I have to be reminded continually all the time. Like, do you know how long this person has been doing this? Like I was with the president of iHeart Radio, and he was like, my number one podcast has been around for like 30 years, Coline. And I'm like, what? And he's like, remember this always. It's gonna take a long time. And I like that you talk about it, because in our age, it's like, oh, you could become a famous person, or you could have a lot of money overnight, and it's really just a marketing gimmick. But the reality is, it took work.
And also, it was never like that for me. I don't know how these people do it now. I can't live in that world. In terms of being a content provider looking for clips, and playing that game where you're just like these guys who are just dumping stuff 3-4 times a day, trying to build, an empire based on, whatever it is their racket is. I get all that, but we're kind of old school in that, we've been doing it a long time, but we were fortunate in that my cosmic timing and my particular skill set, enabled me to seize this moment without having any real plan in place. There was no way to make money at the beginning.
Yeah.
There just wasn't.
It seems like all of your choices, though, never, from what I understand, outside of the divorce situation, never really, money wasn't really a driving motivator for you. It seems like your passion
it was. I don't know what it was, but it was a sort of persistence and passion to do stand-up. So and I've had to deal with that too. I was an established stand-up when I started the podcast, and now this podcast blows up, and nobody really knows me as a stand-up. And so we'd get people coming to the shows like, we're here to support you. And I'm like, I know how to do this. I'm glad you're here.
Veteran
exactly.
In this, okay?
Right. So I had a real hard time with that, being known as an interviewer versus a stand-up, because I always want to be a stand-up. You know? So that was like it was hard for me in my brain to realize that I was becoming this interview guy or this conversation guy, which was great because no one really does it like me, and I was developing something, and now it's kind of established. But at the beginning, I'm like, I'm a comic. I'm just doing this, because this is what this working out, But I love it. I mean, it's also good for recovery in a way. Like the whole premise of AA was one alcoholic talking to another to get you out of your head. Mm-hmm. So interviewing people is a big part of my social life. Is having these conversations with these people who I don't know, and they're fairly intimate and kind of very focused, and I'm kind of all in, and I'm just as nervous and anxious about doing them as I always was. This is like whatever 13 years in or however long, but I think the timing of it was fortuitous in that the business grew around us. Mm-hmm. There was a core community of podcasters, and we all evolved together, and we took there was an issue with a patent troll that was a very complicated thing that was a threat to podcasting, and I remember we had a big meeting about how to deal with it. So once the business started to expand and everyone found their footing, it all happened simultaneously. I was there at the beginning of, I guess, what would be modern podcasting. There were a few before. It was kind of a thing, but it wasn't a cultural phenomenon. So I came up with it. It built I was one of the. I don't know if OG is, I don't want to take any real credit, but I found the conversation space at that time in the way I did it was unique. So, and it became kind of one of the pillars of modern podcasting. And I don't mind saying that, but it was all coincidental. But the quality remains, and it really becomes about like, well, when are we going to stop, dude?
Keep going. But I do have one question. Were there any moments where there was just like almost like an aha, or I can't believe that there were certain interviews where I would be like, holy I can't believe this is me, Mm-hmm. What were those moments?
Well, a sitting president was pretty big.
Yeah, I was going to say, how did you land that?
Yeah. But even before that, because of my business, talking to people like, Robin Williams and people like, big actors, like, people would come to my house and be like, where the fuck am I? I'm kind of like here. I don't know where I am. I don't know how you found this studio. But there were a lot of big performers. I was talking to some old guys. Sometimes I'd go to people's houses and do it. I was like, I'm all in. So I talked to a lot of people that I thought were pretty impressive. But when the president became a thing, that was crazy.
I just want to know like what that day was like. I want you to paint me that picture of even also getting the interview.
That was like 7 years in. Well, ultimately what happened was, there was conversation earlier on. It was in his last term, and there was some conversation in the beginning of that term that maybe as vice president that Biden might want to do it, and but we weren't really a political show. That's one thing coming out of political radio, which both me and my producer did. We were like, no politics. I'm not going to do it.
Of course.
So we detached from it completely and became this other show. I've talked politics since then because when Trump was president, I was profoundly concerned, and I'm still concerned, but it's difficult. It's primarily not that kind of dialogue. But someone in the president's office, someone in Obama's crew, thought it would be a good thing for him to do the podcast because it was his last term. It was the last year. You know, you don't want to be a lame duck. You know, he wanted to be relevant. And, you know, they reached out and said, let's do it. And, you know, my producer, who's like, you know, a straight shooter, decent guy, real political dude. Like, it's funny because the date they had wanted him to come. I was supposed to be in Hawaii on vacation. Okay. So I literally told my producer, I'm like, I don't know, man. I don't know if I can do it. I'm supposed to be on vacation.
Get the freak out.
And right. And then it turns out, like, you know, it was booked, like, for the day that I got back or the day or 2 days after I got back. And I remember my producer telling me, he's like, you know, I wouldn't have let you go.
Yeah. Like, fuck out of here.
Okay. But, you know, you talk to famous people enough. Yeah. And granted, it's the president. Yeah. But, you know, people are just people, and you get a sense of people. I mean, I've done 1,500 of these things.
Yeah, 1,500? Have you really?
Yeah, we're coming up on 1,500. And, you know, I've talked to a lot of different kinds of people. But the president was a big deal. But the trick of it was, look, a lot of things had to happen for it to happen. But we were fairly specific that it wasn't going to be political in the sense that, you know, this is going to be what we do. This is going to be a conversation about life. Yeah. So I was down in Hawaii. I read his book, and I wasn't really as nervous as you would think, you know. But this, my producer was brilliant in it all, because, you know, he had to go out to my house. He lives in Brooklyn, so he flew out to the house so the Secret Service could do a sweep. They had to come and figure out how to set up a parameter, how to get the president of the United States into this little neighborhood, into Highland Park, and how to do it safely. So Brendan was there for that, and they were trying to figure out where they could put snipers and, you know, how to make a perimeter. And you know, the roof of the garage was not strong enough to hold the snipers, so we had to ask my neighbor, Dennis, if we could put snipers on his roof. And he was thrilled. Yeah, I
would have been thrilled, too.
Yeah, he's retired. He's excited. And then they, you know, they tented my driveway so the motorcade could park and they could come up on, you know, without any sight lines, and then walk into the back and come into the garage. And they set up this, like about a week before, they put this box in my spare bedroom, which was like hooked up to a special phone line, like in case all communications went down, they'd have communications.
Oh my gosh.
So that thing humming along was the most menacing part of the whole thing. And, you know, so day of, we'd set up a bunch of listening stations on the deck for people, like for his people to be out there. He didn't need a pre-interview. He let us do whatever questions we wanted. He didn't. Okay. What's the word? He
didn't do like restrictions or anything?
No. What's the word I want? There was no screening of the question.
Oh yeah. Do you ever let people do that?
No.
I don't let people.
But it's the president.
Okay. Yeah.
You know, but we were kind of held in line. But like, he was some intellectual guy. You know, he could carry himself. He wasn't like, you know, some whack job. Yeah. You know, those guys, the presidents are pretty well managed. Yeah. You know, especially with press. Yeah. But, you know, Obama was like, you know, whatever. Yeah. And it was kind of intense, you know, because there's a lot of people around. You know, we're waiting for the president. And like, look, man, like, he had gone to school at Occidental briefly, so there was that connection. But there was also news that had broken. Like, literally within the last. Yeah. Within that week, that guy shot all those people at that church. All those black people got shot by that little lunatic, racist white kid. And that was a big thing. So we didn't even know if he was going to come. Yeah. Which we would have understood.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But he was going to come. So we had to figure out how to talk about that. There was some, you know, Supreme Court stuff coming down. There was a little bit of business that was unfolding that we needed to address politically and culturally. But the rest was going to be personal, and we had an hour. So Brendan, you know, we had to figure it out. Usually I do like you know, I kind of wing it. Yeah. But we had a tight hour, and there was shit we needed to get to. So we made a structure so we would get to it. Okay. And we're all waiting around, and, you know, me and Brendan, I'm in the house, you know, Secret Service. It was funny because they came by earlier with the dogs, the bomb dogs, and I got 3 cats, and I was like, look, man, you know, I got these cats, and they're in the bedroom. Is there any way, you know, can you trust me on the bedroom? Because I don't want the bomb dogs fuck with the cats.
Did they?
Yeah, they did. So we're all waiting. Secret Service, there's like 15 people about, and they're around, and they're on the perimeter. The snipers, they're watching the snipers walk up. They closed off the streets. All the cars were off the streets.
They closed off the streets?
Well, but just my street, the neighborhood. Yeah, there couldn't be any parked cars on the street.
Yeah.
It's a little street on a little hill in Highland Park. But to his benefit, he was staying in Beverly Hills, and he didn't take the motorcade through the city, which would have like fucked everything up.
Yeah.
But he was going to fly in on the helicopter, like on the Air Force 2 or whatever it is. And, I'm standing around. We're all standing around. And, I'm like, are you going to let me know when he's close? And they're like, yeah, well, and he's 20 minutes out. And then we saw the helicopter, like the presidential helicopter with the Ospreys in front of it. And they were going to land at the Rose Bowl, which is like 10 minutes away. And we saw him in the air. I'm like, all right, so he's close, And then it was just nuts, man. It was like, the motorcade's coming up, and they come up my street. They park, and there's all these people coming up that tented thing, his entourage, and I don't even see him, and they're coming up to drive on him. Then I just see all of a sudden, I see a hand go, Mark, and it's like Obama, and I'm like, hey, Mr. President. And,
That had to have been a surreal moment, though.
Totally. Like, and my producer, he's in a suit, and we're just hanging out waiting for the president. And I shake his hand. I say, he goes, we gonna have a good time? I'm like, I hope so, and we go in there, and it was intense, man. I had one Secret Service guy in there, and he was behind me, so I didn't see him. Obama was there. I remember I asked him, are you nervous about this? And he said, if I was nervous about this, we'd all be in trouble.
Obama has like a cool sense of humor, but I love his poise.
Oh, he's great.
I love the way, and I feel like he really processes his answers.
Oh yeah, very deliberate.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like you've got to, I keep it moving because he can, he can talk. Yeah. And you got to be careful. You don't want to get in the weeds with politics because he can very deliberate, but it'll go on for a while. And we only had an hour, so I keep it going. Yeah. And then we got, into the stuff that we needed to talk about, and we talked about his life. And, it was kind of blew up, not just because he was president, but because he used the N-word, and like he made an example on the podcast, like, racism isn't over just because people don't use the N-word. But he said it. Yeah. And it was like, well, I didn't really notice it because it's like as a comic, you hear a lot of things, but it didn't register to me as like, oh, this is going to be a huge deal. Yeah. But my producer was like, this is going to be a huge deal. Like, this is going to be crazy. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And, we only did a couple of interviews afterwards. My producer, who was working for Chris Hayes on MSNBC at the time as well, we did an interview with Chris, and I did Terry Gross on NPR. Those were the only two interviews. Because once we released it with that word in there, it blew up. Okay. Like, it was like global news. Like, they were parked in front of my house. How do you feel about it? They want to know how I felt about it. It just became news. Like, the right was like, why does he get to use it? All the shit. It was crazy. But my producer, he managed it like a goddamn champ. We did the two interviews, and no one else got near us. And that was it. They were in my driveway, and I didn't deal with them.
Wow, the news people.
Yeah.
Wow. When you look back at we're about to close up, unfortunately, but when you look back at your life story, what would you say was your? Well, I think you covered it, but what was that one milestone where you were like, I don't know if I could go on. I think we covered it, but just
it happened all the time.
It happened all the time.
Yeah, because with comedy, I saw my friends getting successful, and I wasn't. What am I doing? But it got to a certain point where you don't really have a plan B. Like, I never had a plan B, and it gets further and further away. You think you have a plan B, but what is it? What am I going to go back to cooking at a restaurant? What am I going to teach? Am I going to go back to school? The further away that shit gets, what am I qualified to do? Like, I used to do a joke about it. It's like you get to a certain point where things aren't working out, but, there's no plan B in place. Then your brain sort of goes like, hey, well, I don't have to do this. I could always, oh, shit. There used to be something,
Well, sometimes when I get really stressed, I'll make a joke, and I'm like, sometimes I just think about moving to a small town and working at Walmart. And people will be like,
disappearing.
Just like disappearing and working a regular job and living a regular life where I'm not competing against my invisible self.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I feel like I have, these things that I'm aspiring to be, but when stress levels get too high, I'm like, I can totally work at Walmart. And then in my brain, it's like, how long do you think you're going to last? Like, like.
I don't know. Like
That's literally my plan B is like, I move to a small town. I live in a little house. And I work a register at a deli or something,
If your ego can handle that, it's a nice place to go in your brain if that makes you feel better. Like I don't know. I just kept pressing along, and I kept pushing and pushing. And, I could, I was still in the game in a way. Like I would do Conan, I'd do TV, I'd do radio. Like, there was always, I'd get a deal here and there. So there was always something, which isn't always great, that was, encouraging me to keep going. And, I wasn't, again, selling tickets as a comic, but, I knew people who knew me and I could, I would go do the job and I could get on stage and everything. But there were just sometimes you get indulged or you keep getting little paychecks here and there and you should quit. Yeah. I've seen, I've been in this game a long time, right? So almost 40 years. Yeah. People come and go. Some people disappear. You don't know how people survive. You have no idea what people are up to. You see comics, you don't see them for 10 years. You're like, what have you been doing? Some guys get out altogether. Yeah. Some guys go into writing. They go into radio. They go into, producing, whatever it is, or they get out. Yeah. But there's something, when you're the one in charge of deciding when you're done, delusion could certainly feed into that. And you kind of have to be delusional to make it go at this game. Yeah. You have to be. Yeah. And also, I've grown to realize that, there were people in the past where I'd seen them, what's this guy thinking? This guy's never going to do it. Mm-hmm. And they do it. Yeah. They figure it out. Yeah. They figure out something. Mm-hmm. So I don't really judge, and also being a delusional to a certain degree is necessary.
I think so.
To do this. Yeah, but you do it innately because you want to do this. You don't plan on being delusional.
No.
But you have to. You have
to be.
Of
delusional.
Course.
I think anytime you're pursuing your dreams, especially there's no resume to get to. I didn't work a million places to get to this point. I just had a vision, or you have a vision, and you're like, I'm gonna. Kind of like what I was saying. I had a vision, and then I take one step at a time, and things fall into place.
I actually think that kind of works if you don't talk about your vision too much, and you don't smoke too much weed. But yeah, there's been definitely pivotal points.
Why do you think if you talk about it too much, it's
because you just it's if you there's some things I want to do, and I stick them in my brain, and I don't sit there and meditate on them. But I know I want to do it. There's a small menu of things I want to do. Mm-hmm. So I'll put it in my brain that I want to do it. And then at some point, the opportunity reveals itself and I do it. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if it's magic or what. But the thing about how it happened for me in that, that the podcast happened and my timing was right, is that the one thing I knew is that a lot of opportunities came from the podcast. Book opportunities, acting opportunities. I did my own show on IFC. Stand-up became a real business for me. I got a following. But that all came out of the podcast. Mm-hmm. But the one thing I knew when I did that podcast was that, I was ready to do whatever. I'd been in the game, I was in my 40s, right? So the podcast starts 2009, 63, 73, 83, 93, 2003. So I'm 45, man.
Yeah.
So
when you started,
yeah. Wow. So look, or was that it? Yeah, something like that. Maybe if not older. When I started the podcast. Wow. But I've been doing comedy since '88. Yeah. So I had chops. I had radio chops. I had stand-up chops, and I had some acting chops, and I definitely had put my 10,000 hours in, right? So by the time the other opportunities happened, it was gravy, man. I'll try that. Yeah. I don't give a shit. Yeah. Even without money, it's here come the opportunities. When I was younger, I get opportunities. I wasn't ready, but I was so hungry for them. Yeah. I'd take them anyways, and then they don't work out. Yeah. Because it's hard to know when you're ready. It's one thing to be delusional and committed and persistent to doing something, but if you get an opportunity that you may not make yourself, you better be ready to do it. Do you know what I mean? Like, because what I'm saying, like, yeah, the podcast, I made that myself, but with acting and, doing stand-up and movie options. Like, if I get a deal, if someone goes, we want you to do this, for our network already. Like, back in the day, I'd be like, yeah, of course. But I wasn't ready. But now, like, I knew after the podcast, after a few years, like, I can do anything. I put the work in.
Yeah.
I can show up for that gig.
Yeah.
With full confidence in a full self-actualized way.
And did you ever, and this will be my last, did you ever focus on your age too? Because when I was young, I would be like, by the time I'm 24, I want to be a millionaire. But I don't know if it's because I came from being poor, where money was like always a issue.
Yeah. I guess I did a little bit. But I don't remember. Like, I always thought, like, there used to be this idea that, as you get older, the heroes that you wanted to emulate or be like, they the age goes up. Like, at first, like, I want to be like, Richard Pryor or whatever.
Yeah.
But then, like, you pass a certain line of age, and it's like, well, Rodney Dangerfield didn't make it really till he was like 60. And, like, that's the new guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a thing.
I always try to remind myself of the founder of KFC.
Oh, yeah.
Did you hear his story about how he was like living in his car, he was trying to sell his recipe off, and he didn't make it till he was like in his 60s.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, get those.
And I'm always like, yo,
those.
He didn't make it till he was like 60. You got time.
Yeah, that helps you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like ultimately, whether you backload it or not, it is a process, and you don't really know how it's going to work out in this business. Like, I had no anticipation, and by the time I started the podcast, I was pretty bleak, pretty depressed. I was looking at a lifetime of being like a B headliner in a way, or just kind of hammering it out, and it's almost suicidal, really, and because I didn't know what else to do.
But at least you weren't, but you were almost suicidal, but you did not cave in sobriety.
No, I didn't drink.
Yeah, that's amazing, though.
Well, yeah, well, that's if you work that first step, man, you do know, that if you understand what powerless means, like if the idea is like you are powerless over whatever and your life has become unmanageable, you realize that what that means is that I have no ability to control my drinking or drug use. And I've proven that to myself again and again, that I can't control it. Mm-hmm. So if you get that in your head deep enough, you know that taking a drug or taking a drink is only going to lead to more drugs and more drinks. It's not going to give you anything but that.
Oh, okay.
So once you understand that, like, because like as an addict person, it's like if you're honest with yourself, you don't. The idea is like I can drink regular. It's like no, you can't. You never did. So you got to get it into your mind that like if I'm going to drink, that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
It's gonna be every day, and it's gonna be for real.
Yeah.
Like there's all this illegal weed around. I used to love weed, but I know that like if I start doing a gummy or smoking a little weed, it's gonna be every day. It'll be every day within 2 weeks.
Wow.
It's the nature of the game.
But the first step is to recognize that you're powerless.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's the heavy one.
I think I'm gonna save that for myself.
Well, the weird thing is powerlessness as a position. You realize that if you really think about it, you're powerless over most things.
Yeah.
So. Yeah.
I had a tough year this year, and so I've been starting to realize that slowly. It took me like hitting my head. You repeat the same actions, you just get the same results, and I'm like, you know what? You gotta admit this one right here. You have hit insanity, and I think in that you realize that you're powerless.
Well, that's the equation.
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I just want to say it's a pleasure having you. Your meal was a 10 out of 10.
Oh, good.
Okay, and the last couple episodes, my guests will know I've been like it will never happen again. I for sure will go home. I'm keeping the tahini sauce. Did you want it?
No, take it.
Okay.
I'm gonna take the barbecue sauce. You can even have that.
I will.
I'll get another one.
Are you sure?
That. Yeah.
Oh, I was gonna say I'm definitely gonna get shout outs to the Japanese barbecue sauce and the tahini sauce.
What's the name? Backhands.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me just tell you guys that sauce, rice, the Beyond Burger. I think the Beyond Burger's texture and flavor.
A lot better than you thought, right?
Yeah. Well, I've had Beyond Burgers. I do have one question. How do you cook a Beyond Burger and know it's cooked?
Well, they brown it on both sides. I don't think there's anything in there like raw meat. I think it's all plant stuff, anyways.
Oh, okay.
But you just cook it like a burger, but you don't dry it out. Just cook it like a burger.
I definitely 100% will make this meal at home for me and my minion.
There you go.
But yeah, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule. How can fans keep up with you? It's
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, you guys know how to keep up with Marc Maron. Come on.
WTFpod.com is the website for the podcast. I'm at Marc Maron on Instagram and
Do you still have a
Twitter
Patreon and all that?
I never had a Patreon.
Because you were before it ever. A lot of podcasts that I know are doing it, and
I don't even know what it is. I'm not really that tech savvy. I've got a TikTok too, but I'm not that. I have a guy that just puts stuff up there. Instagram. Occasionally, if you follow me on Instagram, I'll do a live, and they'll be long, and they usually happen the day that I have to record for the podcast the next day. Every Sunday and Wednesday, I've got to do the ads and the intros for the interview. And sometimes before I do that, I'll go on Instagram Live for like an hour and a half.
Okay.
And just walk through my life, talk to my cats, play guitar. Yeah, I did it. I started doing it during the pandemic just to stay sane and stay connected to an audience. Yeah. And I would do almost like a morning show.
You went through a lot during the pandemic.
Yeah,
So.
I did. My girlfriend passed away, and
you stayed strong, like sobriety. I don't know
if I stayed strong. I went through a lot of pain, but I did not. I
didn't.
Stayed sober.
Yeah, you stayed sober. See, the only reason why I say that is because typically, from the little bit that I know about addiction, is like when those things happen, you find those ways to cope.
Yeah,
but
what you know when you get enough sobriety is that adding drugs or drink to this ain't gonna help nothing. Mm-hmm. And it could just lead to more drugs and drink because coping's one thing, but you're built to cope no matter what. Mm-hmm. You just have to feel the feelings. Like, because drugs and drink is not really coping. Self-medicating is not really coping, especially if you have a problem, because then that becomes the problem. Yeah. The thing is like, you have the feelings and, eventually it'll get better.
I had a conversation with my little brother the other day, and he said something that I felt was so remarkable. On a group text with our family, he had said something like he was depressed. And I'm like, I've never heard my brother use this term. Yeah. So I reached out to him like, what's going on? He's like, don't worry about it. I was like, why? He goes, depression's like a cold. He's like, eventually, in a couple days, it's going to ease up. You just go through it. And I never thought of it like that, but just the thought of thinking of, okay, I'm in this sad state. It's going to be a moment in time, and then I'm going to come through it. Yeah. And, shout outs to my little brother, but I thought that was one of the most unique ways of dealing with pain is just like, in a couple days, in a week, I'll be fine. It's a cold.
Well, there's a little saying called feelings aren't facts.
Yeah.
Eventually they'll pass.
They'll pass.
But be careful with the depression. If you got it, if you really got it.
Yeah.
Sadness is sadness.
Sadness is sadness. But thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
I enjoyed our meal, and thanks for sharing your story and being very transparent with me.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. All right. Peace out, guys.